28. Constance. When I was a child, our neighbor had a little white black terrier named Spot. He barked too much and ran into our apartment whenever Mother accidentally left the door open. "Ow, damn Spot," she said with a grin, and it wasn't until I was older and we three girls were sitting on Mother's bed as she read from her complete works of William Shakespeare that I learned the very famous line from the very famous play. The character was crazy, and the spots of blood where there were any. She tried fiercely to wash them away, but she couldn't. What they don't tell you is that blood is much easier to get out than ink. I tried to manage Spot the dog as I washed my dress in the tub. I sat there on my knees in my nightgown, furiously scrambling. I tried to imagine Spot the dog in the doorway and telling him to get out. Out now. Please leave, you little rascal. But my imagination was not strong enough. My hands were still stained black, and my efforts to wash my dress clean were proving very much in vain. I scrubbed it and scrubbed it, and the more I tried, the angrier I got. The feeling just wouldn't stay down. The guilt was still there, oh yes, but it was holding the gate open now, enjoying watching the flow of rage overtake me. I've never felt anything like this before. I couldn't even take a moment to notice it. That is, until the dress tore in my hands. Not even the seam, but the skirt. A giant roll hole stared up at me. I leaned back my heels then, and with the white back of my hand to brush the hair has fallen across my face. It was then I noticed my breath rushing to catch up with me, like I had run a race. Have I run? Have I run home? Or is just the ink on my dress and my madness trying to clean it? "I think I ran home," I said out loud. My voice sounded thin and too quiet even for me. That made me angry and my gut bubbled again. "No!" I said to it, louder this time. I felt the strange tension of the sound of my voice echoing in our small bathroom. I smiled to myself and looked back at the dress. It was ruined now. Mother will be angry, but since it's ruined... I pulled the wet fabric of the tub and dragged the dress out of the bathroom and into my own room. I knew somewhere inside the water was trailing behind me, but I felt like I was walking in a dream. I sat on my little chair and put the wet mass of dress on my desk. It flooded into like a large dead fish. I looked around quickly for something to cut the material with, if I had the sewing kit in my room. But then I realized, who needs scissors? I grabbed the fabric and pulled. The sound of tearing more produced now. It wasn't underwater. It was so satisfying. I pulled out the frayed edges, the muscles of my arms and neck tight engaged. With a piece of fabric came from me. From the rest of the dress, I felt the same elated feeling and smiled. My anger was almost turning joyful. I got up and bent down into my knees, reaching under my bed. My hand touched the edge of the box of my chemistry set, and my fingers grabbed for it. I pulled it out and sat hammering for a moment, gently raising the cover. It was such a beautiful object. I opened it, and it folded into my lap. 3 separate sections of bottles tightly fit into the cardboard backing. It all looked so perfect. I didn't even want to use it, but of course I did want to use it. I unhooked the dropper from the little holder and then reached for the tiny bottle of bleach. That's where I start. In an obvious place, I quickly filled up the dropper. I carefully held it just above the ink. My hand was shaking a little. I reached up with the other hand, one to adjust my goggles, to make sure they were tied around my eyes. I didn't know what kind of reaction this strange substance might produce. If it might be a noxious gas even. With that in mind, I held my breath as I squeezed the dropper. A single drop fell onto the surface of the fabric, onto the ink, but the ink did not mingle or evaporate or do anything that I could have predicted. Instead, it peeled itself away from the drop and moved around it, circling it. I leaned even closer, still not breathing. The drop was so small, but my eyesight was keen. Was the ink? Was it climbing up the sizes of the little drop? I tapped at the drop with a dropper that bursted. It didn't spread like a bubble, but instead it raced this way and that, as if it was trying to escape the ink of all sizes. Brand's inky body exploded in my mind's eye. I sat upright. I yanked the goggles off and felt my throat constricted. Stared down my hands, still inked.